State Department was sending McCarrick around the world. Joe Biden knew him and had a very close relationship with him as a Catholic. McCarrick was a prominent guy in that process. So in 2008, when Joe Biden became vice president, one of the guys that worked for him, Tom Donnellan was a Catholic. He went to Catholic University. And who worked for him was a guy named Dennis McDonough. So McCarrick started visiting Dennis McDonough right out of the gate in 2008. And that was actually the beginning of what they called the Catholic Spring. Later, they called it the Catholic Spring in these emails. That's when they started. It was 2008 with McDonough and McCarrick, Biden, the Donnellans, moving up through the ranks, getting McCarrick in and out of there. And then they put him to work to get Francis elected.
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
But joining us right now by phone is Mike McCormack. He's the author of his latest book, An Almost Insurmountable Evil, How Obama's Deep State Defied the Catholic Church and Executed the Wuhan Pandemic. We'll link to it in the show notes for you. Mike McCormack, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me on.
I was going through the extensive timeline that Catholic News Agency put out of the history of Theodore McCarrick from his birth to his death and all points in between. What did we know and when did we know it and who knew it and who discussed it? I went through it extensively yesterday. And in 2008, when Obama won the White House, Theodore McCarrick boasted about his great connections at the White House. This is something that you've written about and talked about extensively. Tell me about the Obama-McCarrick connection.
Well, he would have known Joe Biden for a long time. McCarrick, I don't know if the Catholic timeline, the Catholic News Agency timeline, had his activities for the State Department in the 90s. But in the 1990s, Joe Biden was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. He would have been involved in State Department activities. The State Department was sending McCarrick around the world on its behalf as like this religious freedom person, like emissary. And so Joe Biden knew him and had a very close relationship with him as a Catholic, as a politician who was very ambitious. He wanted the Catholics vote. He wanted to court the Catholic vote. And McCarrick was a prominent guy in that process. So in 2008, when Joe Biden became vice president, one of the guys that worked for him was Tom Donnellan. Donnellan was a Catholic. He went to Catholic University. And who worked for him was a guy named Dennis McDonough. McDonough is the guy who became the go-to guy for McCarrick to visit in the White House. So McCarrick started visiting Dennis McDonough right out of the gate in 2008. And that was actually the beginning of what they called the Catholic Spring. Later, they called it the Catholic Spring in these emails. But that's when they started, was 2008 with McDonough and McCarrick, Biden, the Donnellans, moving up through the ranks, getting McCarrick in and out of there. And then they put him to work to get Francis elected.
Wow. Something I think we talked about the last time you were on the program was there's a lot of people who are speculating the USAID was an affront for the CIA. And all that came out of the Kennedy, the Kennedy administration and assassination, which we've had some conversations on that as well. So what's interesting to me is Theodore McCarrick had a meteoric rise, actually. He was only a priest for like 6 or 7 years when he was given the honorary title of Monsignor from Pope Paul VI. And only a handful of years after that, he's actually made a bishop, an auxiliary bishop, and he goes on to rise from there. He had credible accusations levied against him, and the Vatican knew it, and still they made him both the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., and a cardinal. There were lots of reports against him, and he not only continued to rise in the Catholic Church, but as you just pointed out, he was traveling on behalf of the United States government and extensively reporting. Do you think that there's any credible connection between him the State Department, the USAID, the CIA? Like, was he up to anything more nefarious, or was he just riding the gravy train and liked wine and cheese and free airplane rides?
No, personally, I think he was a CIA asset from early on. He came after he left the seminary. He came down to Washington and studied at Catholic University. He got a master's and a PhD. He got a PhD in sociology. After that, they sent him to be in charge of a college in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So this is 1960. I think it was 63, 64, something like that. Shortly after the Bay of Pigs, Cuba was a hot spot for the CIA. And McCarrick, as a guy who came to Washington, and James Grine may have some really interesting things to talk about McCarrick's time in St. Gallen, Switzerland. He has a background with his family in that town, and McCarrick came out of that town, according to things I've heard James say, and then became sort of involved in moving up the ladder in the Catholic Church. Well, I think the CIA was also part of that. There's a guy who was a CIA, a guy named James Angleton. He was a major CIA player in the late 50s. In the 40s, actually, he was in the station chief in Rome. He was part of the CIA assimilation with the Vatican during World War II and afterwards. Well, then he started working in Europe, and he was working in, they were pulling a lot of Soviet defectors out of Switzerland, not that far from St. Gallen, Switzerland, where you can ask James Grine about this, what he knew about St. Gallen, Switzerland, because McCarrick went there. And then he came to America, and that's when he went through this process of going up the ladder and going into San Juan, Puerto Rico, and then up the ladder into the New York fundraising. And, the CIA, what they do is they go around the world and pass out money and buy people. And that's basically what McCarrick did. He had always had money at the ready to hand out. And the question has always been, who gave him the money? And the answer was always, well, it was just wealthy Catholic donors. Well, in my opinion, the wealthy Catholic donors had the initial CIA.
That's right. That is another part of the timeline that is very, very curious. When he becomes the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., after they rejected him for New York City because of the allegations, he gets Cardinal Giwich, then Archbishop Giwich, to rubber stamp the, hey, this guy's okay, and then he gets promoted. He does not take a salary in Washington, D.C., but is still traveling the world, passing out envelopes full of cash. Where does he get his money? It seems very interesting. After he's retired, after many of these allegations continue to chase him down, he still travels the world. Although he was told not to, he still travels the world, still passes out envelopes full of cash. In fact, that was one of the things about the whole 2008 Obama White House, the Obama Biden administration, that he was saying, hey, listen, I got these great contacts at the White House. This is going to be wonderful. And he was told to pass those connections on, to not be the guy who's going to be interacting between the Vatican and the White House. And apparently he never did that. Like he still was visiting the White House very frequently, you say.
Oh, yeah. He was actually working for the White House. He was meeting with Dennis McDonough regularly, meeting with the Chief of Staff, Richard Daley, he was Chief of Staff at the time. And then he met with Joe Biden and Barack Obama, sort of at like functions, like state dinners if he was invited, or, like an event or something. But he was regularly in there. And then in 2012 and 2013, actually 2012 is a really significant time. The day after the Benghazi attacks, so this is September 12th, 2012, there was a speech done by Dennis McDonough at Catholic University. And McCarrick was the introduced McDonough. And so they had a meeting there. They knew each other. They would have discussed how they're going to, discuss the event. McDonough's speech was about how Obama got his start in politics through the Catholic Church in Chicago, and how he had this sort of overall view of politics and the church and, affiliation with the church. Almost within weeks after that is when McCarrick goes down to Argentina. And it's not really clear. This is in the report on Theodore McCarrick that's put out by the Vatican, but it's only a footnote that he went there. It's not clear who he met with. It's not clear if he met with then Archbishop Bergoglio, or Cardinal Bergoglio. And then weeks after that, in December of 2012, he goes back to Argentina. And it's not clear who he met with down there or why he was there. 6 weeks after that meeting with Bergoglio, or after that trip to Argentina in December 2012, that's when Pope Benedict resigns. And who's in Rome when that happens? Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. He just happened to be there. There's a lot of coincidences of travel right around the switchover and the election of Pope Francis.
I have to speculate that he knew where all the bones were buried, which is why he was able to get away with as much as he could for as long as he did. You think that's a fair assumption?
Oh, yeah. He knew where the bones were buried. He was an operative who was out there. I think he was facilitating a lot of the he was on the board of the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops, and he was also on Catholic Relief Services. He was behind the scenes an operative in both those entities, and he was pushing funding towards them when they needed it through the government agencies that he was now affiliated with through his Whitehouse contacts.
I had an interview with Dr. Paul Kengor when he published his work on Bella Dodd. How much did Bella Dodd actually help to infiltrate the Catholic Church by planting communists in our seminaries? It's the definitive work, in my opinion. But it seems to me that Theodore McCarrick would be the perfect example of the efforts of the communists in those early years. Do you think there's a strong connection with him and the communist infiltration?
It may not be communist. It may be out of the St. Gallen, and the St. Gallen infiltration may have come out of Nazi holdovers. There might have been Nazi holdovers in Switzerland in the late 40s and 50s. And I think that may have been what happened more than communists. But it could have been communists, too. The Nazis hated the communists as much as the CIA. Angleton was a communist hater. So if he finds, I'm speculating here, but that would be something to ask James Grine about what he knows about St. Gallen's. Yeah,
I will. An almost insurmountable evil, how Obama's deep state defied the Catholic Church and executed the Wuhan pandemic. Mike McCormack, you got a great book here. You got a lot of insight as somebody who was in the Obama-Biden White House. Last thoughts here. What do you think about the legacy of McCormick? You got seconds.
McCarrick. Well, I really am sad that he didn't follow Archbishop Pagano's advice to publicly confess his sins. So I hope he's okay where he wound up, but I fear he didn't really make his peace with his maker and with us.
Yeah, we don't know, do we? That's part of the scandal of it all.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.